Hello. Uh, Carlos, can you respond? Can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine, Anant.
Awesome. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Uh, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with Vikas and Carlos to talk about how StepZen and Apigee are working together to deliver the best of GraphQL, REST APIs that you all love, and API management. Okay. Uh, we'll introduce ourselves, but anything to say, Vikas?
Well, I think we've done a few of these webinars in the past few months and years, and I know there is a bit of a digital fatigue, but what I'm really excited about today is the fact that you and I are in person,
Yes.
and I'm so happy to see you here in
Oh, that's
our
that's
offices
that's
at
that's
Google, and
yeah.
it being live from here and actually talking to everyone about something which we are truly passionate about. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
actually excited to be with you and your team today.
Because yes, when you met me in the lobby, you gave me a fist bump. I said, "What's the reason to give a fist bump? We are going to be together in a room anyway." And Carlos is enjoying kind of cold Minnesota, so we'll leave him to his misery. Uh, okay, so just as a way of introduction, my name is Anand Chingran. I am nominally the CEO of StepZen, but I've had the pleasure of being involved with APIs and Apigee for quite some time. And I'm now in kind of familiar surroundings. This room where we are, I used to be hanging around this for a long time. So it's just an absolute pleasure to be here with Vikas. Vikas?
Great. And uh, so like I mentioned earlier, we are live from Google Cloud. For Google Cloud, I lead product for Apigee and AppSheet. Apigee, obviously, the market-leading API management product, and we brought into Google a couple of years back a platform for no-code to actually empower and democratize the access of APIs to line of business users.
I love it. Yes.
So we are kind of expanding our portfolio since then. And my background, besides being in API management and doing no code recently, I have been in the integration and API management and business process space for the last two decades. And this is a space which has always been fun and exciting. Because it's evolved so quickly. And
Yes.
we're discussing GraphQL today, but we've seen this journey
Yes.
evolve
We used to
from
talk iPaaS and all the integration stuff and everything else.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome, Vikas.
All right.
And Carlos?
Thanks, Anant. Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Eberhardt. I also have a bit of a history with APIs and API management, but now I'm spending most of my time having fun working with GraphQL, supporting our customers at StepZen.
And you didn't say you're wearing a shirt of both StepZens and
I
on top
am.
of
I
it.
happen to have. Oh, that's the wrong
Yes.
side. My Google Cloud vest on, so I'm almost. It's
Awesome.
almost like I'm there in the room with you.
Awesome. Fantastic. I don't wish the Minnesota cold here for anyone, but awesome having you here. Okay, so Vikas, APIs have been around for a long time. Why are you excited about APIs?
I think APIs have been around for almost a decade or more now, and APIs have been really powering the digital transformation and acceleration, right? And uh, we obviously at Google, we do a lot of research and we look at a lot of data before we make decisions in terms of investments in products. And our focus has always been to help users. And when we look at the users are coming through different channels today. And as a part of the digital journey, APIs have become the tip of the spear for providing that experience to those
Yes.
users. And last year and the year before, we did research talking to a number of CIOs and CTOs and companies, on the business side as well. And if you look at the results of the survey, 56% have been really leveraging APIs to build digital experience and products. It's right on the top, right?
Wow.
The key thing is experiences help onboard users and consumers quickly. And most importantly, they are trying to adopt or acquire or buy a product or use something, right? APIs are also the second one. If you look at this data, is accelerating innovation by exposing assets with partners, and the list goes on, right? There is a common theme when you look at the results of the survey. All of these things are only possible through access to data.
Yes.
Right? If you don't have access to data, and you're not able to give that data in a format which makes it meaningful for the consumer and the user from a business outcome perspective, the distance the user has to come to you is more.
Yes.
Right? So yeah, from my perspective, we continue to do more research in this space, but data becomes the key to make the impact with any of the investments and innovation that you're driving with APIs.
Absolutely. And that kind of dovetails very well into what we think GraphQL is doing. It's our view. It's a view of a lot of people that are doing APIs and people who are doing digital experiences, that GraphQL is that layer that takes the data that is logged, that has been exposed by APIs, and kind of brings it together and delivers the data, okay, into the applications. And the reason GraphQL is on fire is because front-end teams really need to, application teams really need to kind of continuously innovate with respect to experiences. It's a hyper competitive environment. And having the liquidity of the data to be able to flow into their applications makes a huge difference. Okay, here are some quotes on the top which you can read. But because what really surprised me when we started to do StepZen was how much GraphQL is becoming mainstream within enterprises. Okay, and when I went in, I thought that maybe when we talk to some customers, maybe 1 or 2 in 10 would say, yeah, we know about GraphQL. I think the answer is more like 8 over 10. Okay, and it's because it's really the last mile to be able to deliver the data to the application.
We share the same view. Apigee, as you know, is a market leader, and of course, you've been a part of Apigee, and Driver had a lot of us on the call share the same passion about the space and about Apigee as a portfolio. Apigee, the lens that we've always focused on is how can we make the developers successful, right? So we were focused on obviously helping developers through their journey of creation, consumption, securing, and managing APIs.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But developers obviously have choices, and besides REST, non-RESTful interfaces like GraphQL, gRPC, and others have become extremely popular.
Yes.
And we were the first ones to actually embrace that as a part of our runtime as well. So today, as you are aware, in Apigee, we have the GraphQL support
Yes,
for runtime.
and we love it because Carlos will show something around it.
Yeah, and I think the important thing that from our perspective is, and we share the same view, is we want to offer best tools that we can to the developers who are trying to solve something for their own use cases and for their products and services they're building. This is a great slide, by the way, because while it shows a reflection of the digital natives who are building products and using GraphQL and driving some of the adoption, as you rightly pointed out, we're seeing a clear pattern of enterprise adoption as well. So completely aligned with that.
Awesome.
I think the next slide is a great slide for us to talk about a little bit more meaningfully for our audience, at least for the developers, in the context of how this transition is happening and how GraphQL is actually transforming. So you and I were chatting about this, right? Like, what would be a good example which resonates with everybody? I think we kind of honed into this e-commerce example.
Yes.
All of us have been using e-commerce through the pandemic, I think more aggressively than we were doing before.
Yeah.
And the challenge with e-commerce providers is always that they want to offer more products and services, but also learn quickly and personalize what you're trying to acquire next.
Yes.
Which means that they actually have to have an architecture which can be offering consistent change, innovation.
Yes, that's a great term.
And
yep.
keep the user not only retained but interested in working together, right?
I sometimes tend to hop out of the screen, so let me just kind of come back in.
Yeah, come back to the commerce platform.
Yeah, exactly.
So but all of this actually if you look at, the challenges which exist when you are running a platform like this is, obviously, there is a proliferation of APIs, which
Yes.
creates more of a spaghetti, and it really brings in the challenges of like changes being slow or having downstream impacts,
Yes.
right? So as you and I were chatting, I think, this is a great example to illustrate the value of GraphQL, right? Where Graph can actually simplify the access to data and make it more manageable while delivering value, which is really required in terms of changes and velocity of offering capabilities.
Yes, that's
Right?
exactly right. No, very well put. Very well put. Uh, if I can just add to it, so one of the things that we saw was that in the end, applications need data from multiple silos, and obviously with the velocity that the kind of data that they need always kind of keeps on changing. And the question is, where does that logic sit to kind of mix and match the data from multiple backends? And what we saw was that enterprises was kind of struggling with kind of same patterns being repeated application by application by application, and everybody had to become kind of fully versed with all backend protocols and how to handle errors and how to handle performance and pass the data from one application to the other and all that stuff. And GraphQL is a natural place to kind of hydrate all of that out from an application concern into a next tier of concern that kind of takes care of all of these things.
Some of the things which come as concerns from developers when they are adopting GraphQL is around, while shaping the graph, is around performance and optimization. And I think that's where we are partnering and working together, right? You're building a best of breed runtime to support
Yes,
and solve for those use cases. And of course, with Apigee, with caching and other capabilities that we have, you really want to continue to offer that experience to the consumers in, sub milliseconds in terms of the experience they are getting as responses to data.
exactly. What is the purpose, because of assembling a lot of data in one call? Is awesome, right? But if the wheel is spinning, right, while that's happening, you're going to actually lose all your audience, right? So it is not just about how easily can stuff be done, but how performant that stuff can be made. And that's where our partnership, for example, is awesome. I want to move to the next slide and just some of us who have been kind of doing this for a long time kind of completely get it, but I just wanted to do a bit of a level set with respect to it. Notice the and out there because, okay, the whenever a new kind of new technology comes about, there's a lot of froth in that thing where it is GraphQL is the new world, and the rest people have been left behind and everything else. And I think that's just kind of completely wrong. Okay, as we know, everything has its space, and the way REST works, the way REST has worked, is fundamentally the decisions about what data is delivered to the application is made by the API producers. Okay, and in this case, you may have a team that is in charge of customer data, a team that's in charge of orders data, and a team in charge of delivery data, and all the security and management, etc., has been built around the backend teams understanding the kind of the data that they need to deliver. But then that does leave the burden on the application team to then subset the data and mix it and mix and match them. GraphQL says that no, look, we will let the front end teams consume the data in the shape and the amount of data that they want. So, for example, the same thing in that e-commerce example that you're talking about, because if I'm really interested in a customer, and Carlos will show some of it, and we want to really understand what the status of his or her deliveries are, etc., etc., you can issue one query against that GraphQL layer, and it will then go against, guess what, all the REST backends, because the data still sits in REST backend. So all that has happened is that instead of applications interacting directly with the REST data, applications interact with the GraphQL layer that then interacts with the REST data.
I think the important message out here is, obviously, uh, you know, backends to front ends is
An important pattern.
is a very important pattern for any of these use cases that we're describing and talking about. And there's already existing investments in APIs,
Yes.
right? And obviously, these APIs are here to stay, and of course, GraphQL is here to stay and grow from in terms of adoption. Uh, how you can not only preserve but actually optimize this for for coexistence and actually bringing the application to market quickly, and that's key over here.
And the way I like to talk about it is exactly that, which is that GraphQL is a layer that actually leverages your existing investments, okay, and adds certain capabilities, but it's really your existing investments that actually deliver the data that GraphQL finally provides.
And this is the lens that we put in Apigee. Apigee obviously is managing REST, right, exceptionally well. We've added GraphQL to the runtime.
Yes.
We've introduced GraphQL policies, so that like, I think Carlos has a very cool demo to show as he walks through. You can see, how the schema validation, etc., and the actual policy application
Yes.
can be done.
Yeah, I
And then
love it.
finally, you can actually offer the same GraphQL API, GraphQL and RESTful APIs through the developer portal that we have. So, I think coexistence, preserving your investments, and bringing them together for the applications.
Yes, and that's why, even though it didn't come across as bold, the star and star really means that the and is really, really
By the way,
important.
this is my favorite slide of the deck.
Oh, thank you very much for Carlos and Helen for making it work. Okay, awesome. One of the questions that I get asked that who owns the GraphQL API, right? Is if the GraphQL API is assembling the data from multiple backends, the key question, Vikas, is it really the job of the front-end teams to build out that API, or is it the job of the back-end team to build out the API? What's your view there?
It's an interesting question. And as we look at the enterprise bucket, I think if you click once more, you will see a proliferation across the enterprise market, especially with cloud natives, digital natives in the e-commerce space, retail and fintech and others that we're seeing this proliferation. My view is that I think we are empowering the front-end teams to be able to shape the data that they want to do with GraphQL, and it makes it easy for them to take it and shape it for the users. But let's hear you.
Right. So actually, the way we see this, Vikas, is that the front-end teams become GraphQL consumers.
Yes.
And the GraphQL API is an API that is managed by the backend team, because everything that people can think about with respect to the REST APIs, okay, that it needs to be scaled, it needs to be secured, okay, it needs to be authenticated, it needs to have the right performance mechanisms in it. All of those are typical back-end team concerns.
Absolutely,
okay?
Absolutely.
Right?
I think I should have mentioned it when I said
Yes.
front end as
Yes.
consumers
Yes.
of these APIs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
The creation, securing, and modeling and everything else is actually back end responsibility. I
Right.
agree.
So for all of our audience who are responsible for kind of building and managing the REST APIs and everything else, GraphQL is squarely in your concern. Your front-end teams are actually looking for you to deliver these awesome GraphQL APIs that they can consume, but you have to take care of and make sure that it's secured and scaled and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the partnership. Obviously, from kind of a StepZen perspective, we want to be known for delivering awesome GraphQL capabilities to the developers who work with us and customers and teams that work with us. And Carlos will show how easy it is for you to take your existing REST investments and instantly GraphQLize them and make them scale and everything else. But equally importantly, those APIs are APIs.
And they need to be managed.
So, Vikas, and that's why our partnership is just awesome, that it is not just about building the best GraphQL, but it's building the best GraphQL API. Okay. And that's where our partnership comes together.
And I think the last step in this journey is obviously the API consumption.
Yes.
So it's from creation to curation to management to security,
Yes.
right? Applying the policies, and then making sure that these APIs are available through a portal for your consumers to use, right? And consume these APIs, right? So that's where our investments in Apigee for supporting GraphQL for the developers, I think is a key investment. And with this partnership, as you will see through Carlos's demo, you'll see how it's coming together meaningfully. So I'm really excited for Carlos to switch to
Awesome. We are Carlos is getting impatient. we'll just take 2 more minutes,
Yes.
and we'll hand it to Carlos. Carlos, warm up the demo, okay? Uh, so so before you can do kind of GraphQL API management, you have to do GraphQL, okay? We are very proud of in StepZen how easy it is for you to actually not worry about all the things that you would worry about from a GraphQL perspective. How do I write resolvers? How do I do N+1 management? They're all kind of terms in kind of GraphQL lingo that occur all the time. How do I manage the keys to the backend, everything else? We make it really, really easy, independent of your backend, whether it's a database backend, which is fine, but really your REST backend, okay? You just point us to the backend and out pops a GraphQL API that you can go and be up and running. So we want to make it really easy for you to actually get started, and Carlos will show that. But the second thing that we know is that anything that's worth doing, any API that's worth doing, is an API that has to be always up, has to be able to understand the scale, has to be deployed at global scale, etc. And so we are really, really proud of, and this is where, for example, our experience with Apigee and Google Cloud has been just fantastic here, because, okay, we have been able to build an infrastructure that allows for these APIs to actually scale, okay, and with fantastic availability. Obviously, Google Cloud is absolutely awesome with respect to our partner and everything else. So now when you come when you start your journey with StepZen, not only can you make it really easy to build out your API, but you can actually scale that API and do all the performance optimizations and all that stuff around.
And I think it's important that we emphasize the lens here, right? For us in Apigee, we are used by, uh, I want to say, if you look at the top customers, top, users in terms of any vertical, whether it's retail, telco, banking, etc., they're all pretty much using API management
Yes.
from Apigee.
Yes.
And they are serving their customers through mission critical workloads.
Yes.
There are moments in the year when these mission critical workloads become much more important. They're already important through the year, but for example, Black Friday or Cyber Monday is a very important event for our retail customers, or our telecom customers and others. There are customers who are in the banking and telco space, who want to obviously enable and deliver these services. So uptime, availability, and scale is extremely important. And I know when we talked about partnering and working together with StepZen and Apigee, offering the capabilities to our customers together, I think this was a key requirement that we both have from our enterprise customers. And obviously, we are really proud of the work that we've done in Google Cloud and Apigee. And of course, the way you have embraced the capabilities in cloud to offer the same level of resilience, performance, scale, availability that enterprise customers are looking for. So, developers are building applications. Those applications, more than important, and quickly become mission critical.
Yes.
And that's when these things really matter. It may not be a discussion upfront, but with Apigee, obviously our customers are aware of this and are using this in that context, and really happy to see the focus you have on scale for scaling GraphQL.
Yes,
in your runtime.
and not that there's a plug for Google Cloud, but we just absolutely love Google Cloud. Okay, so that's StepZen. Apigee, I've been involved in Apigee for quite some time. I could switch around and talk about this, but please just tell us a few things as to why we are bringing kind of why Apigee rocks.
I mean, I think from our perspective, this session was more about focusing on GraphQL and
Yes.
helping the developers and focus on that. But I did want to emphasize a few things. I mean, Apigee has been a leader for many years. Sixth time in a row, we have been recognized as a market leader in the Gartner MQ, both for our vision and execution. These are hard things to stay,
Yes.
as a leader in the MQ. There is a lot of lens and focus on, how we are executing and delivering towards that as well. We are really proud of the heritage that Apigee has. and the focus that we have on delivering value to our customers as they, is the focus on adopting more APIs, right? So we are talking about APIs getting more democratized and used across, which bring in more and more new challenges in terms of
Let me just,
operability,
what's happening with the lights? Sorry.
security, global reach, and partner ecosystem. And we have, I know Anand just went in and out to help with the lights.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's a big focus for us, and we continue to invest. And I think we just talked about the scale as well as the scale of our customers.
Awesome.
Of course, from a feature function perspective, right from creation, design of an API, all the way to not only securing but helping our customers through the journey of monetizing the APIs,
Yes.
is what Apigee is focused on. And analytics is really important for consistently optimizing, not just for the experience or for the API usage within internal applications, but also for monetization. So we offer, the entire lifecycle management capabilities for API management.
Awesome. And that's why I'm just so excited to bring kind of two best of breed capabilities together. Okay, for everybody who's our audience. Okay, so without further ado, demo. Carlos, am I going to do the setup, or you're doing it?
I think we're already set up.
Okay, awesome. Carlos.
Thank you both. I think one thing I just wanted to point out, I was thinking back to my days as an enterprise architect and kind of evaluating what you were talking about from that perspective. And I think you both hit on quite a few things that would have concerned me. Whenever a new technology was brought in, how do I make it work with my existing stuff? Does it scale? Is it secure? And I believe that we will show here exactly, parts of how we start to address those concerns in this demo. What we're going to do is look at a standard kind of an e-commerce scenario where we will be taking an existing REST API and turning it into a GraphQL API, and then we'll enhance that with some data so that you can get two sources in a single API call, and then we'll publish this in Apigee, and we'll look a little bit at how that scenario works and what the integration is today, and we'll talk a little bit about where it is planning to go. So if we look at a sample, this is obviously just a mock-up of the sort of thing we're talking about doing. That's a little small, I suppose, but if you can see, we're letting the user know where their packages are, whether they were delivered or not, and then we're also providing some contextual information about what the weather is like. Again, this is a mocked up scenario, but you can imagine easily weather is one of those things that actually does affect retail sales quite a bit, and being able to provide contextual weather to a user visiting your e-commerce site is actually pretty important. So if we look at, this is all served up from a GraphQL API, and if we look at what that query might look like, if you're unfamiliar with GraphQL, this is what the consuming developer builds when they're deciding how they want to retrieve data. So they ask for, essentially, I want to get customer and I want to provide an email address, and then these are the fields that I want to get back. I want the name and the city, I want the temperature from weather, and I want details on the orders. And if we show that this is live, if we fire this off, it'll come back. And so it's very nice for the consuming developer, because all they do is say, this is what I want. Give me this. I don't need to know that my weather is being served by AccuWeather or WeatherBug or whoever else is providing that data. I just need to know that I can ask for it from the GraphQL API. So what we'll do here next is we'll build something like this. We're going to use a different customer's API, but we'll inject some data. And I just want to show you sort of what the StepZen experience is like when you build out an API like this. So let me back up quickly here. And I want to show you sort of what the directory structure is like and talk a little bit about how StepZen works. It's a configuration-driven platform, so there isn't really a need to go into a GUI and do a lot of button clicking or anything like that. And it's driven primarily by GraphQL schemas. And I'll give you an example of what a schema looks like. I'll show you the one for weather, for example. It's simply where you define your types and what the data types are. And then that ends up being the data that you can retrieve from that API. So this API that we're going to be building is made up of a few different GraphQL schemas. And again, there's some configuration data in there, API keys, other secrets, that sort of thing is kept out of the schemas and stored securely in the platform, but configured through different files. So if we look at this one today, the customers one is empty. So this is what we're going to build out. We're going to build out our customers API. And we have a sample mock API that looks similar to what we saw from the previous screen. It's just a simple REST API with customers, and I can query and retrieve, a specific customer by passing in a query parameter and getting that information. So now if I want to create a GraphQL schema from this, I need to define what all these types are. And that can be done manually, or we at StepZen are working on some ways to automate this. And we've got a utility right here called JSON to SDL. That's at a website called JSON-to-SDL.com. So if I paste in some JSON and click the convert button, I will get output SDL that I can then copy and use directly in my StepZen schema. So I'll just paste that right in here. And I'm going to change the name of this customer. Since the top level of that JSON didn't say customer anywhere, we just pick a name for it. And I'm going to change that to say customer. So now I have my type defined for that API. What I need to do next is tell StepZen how to retrieve data for that and put it into this type. And that's done pretty easily by defining a query. This is all GraphQL specific. SDL, I'm going to call it customer, and I'm going to say we're going to take an email, which is a required string. That's what the exclamation point means in GraphQL schema, and we'll call it customer. So now I have a query defined that says, if you ask for a customer and you give me an email, I will return this type. And this type has a subtype of orders and address, and those are defined here. So at this point, a consumer really knows all they need to know about how to query this GraphQL API and what the data is going to look like and what the types are. But the server, the StepZen side, doesn't know yet how to populate that. So this is a little bit of unique StepZen capability. We have the @ symbol indicates that it's a GraphQL directive, and that's a custom directive called @REST that tells us we're going to be making a REST call. And it's as simple as saying, what is that REST call? I'm just going to copy it right from this URL. And I'm going to say, this is the endpoint we call. Now, there's one other thing I need to do. You can see here I have this hard-coded to an email address. I'm going to replace that with the parameter from the query. So, and I'll save this. And now if I use my StepZen CLI to start, this will deploy this schema up to StepZen and give me a GraphQL endpoint running in the cloud right away that I can use to call this.
And this is running on Google Cloud right now, Carlos?
And this is running on Google Cloud right now. And there it is. Took 3 seconds, which is actually a little bit longer than usual. And so we have an endpoint that's up and running. Here's the GraphQL endpoint. It tells me how I can call it. StepZen requires an API key. And I have a little utility here right in VS Code that I can make this request. So let's take a look here. I'm calling this API endpoint, and I'm going to be asking for John Doe. And this is going to execute that query. And there we go, it works. And I can see the data is there. So I could ask for someone else and get different data, that sort of thing. So we're already essentially very close to what that app needs in terms of retrieving customers and order information. Now, that's because that REST API had that data in it. The next question. I'm sorry?
John would know that he needs to carry an umbrella or not when picking up the package from outside, right?
Yeah, we have not yet added, but yeah, we will.
We haven't done that yet, but we do have, as I showed before, a very similar API for weather. And again, this one is using Open Weather Map. In this case, we're using Open Weather Map. It's very easy to change providers and change the types to match what that provider needs, or define your own standard type and change the response coming back from that from that API to match that type. So you can create sort of a canonical model for weather, for instance, in your application or your enterprise, and fit other things into that so that you can swap those backends out without issue. So this one is defined, ready to go, and we can make weather queries. If you see, it asks for postal code and a country, which happen to be values from the address type in customers. So you might think, okay, how can I make that call work so that I can just make one query to get it? And we've got another capability that we call the Materializer. Now this is essentially 2 lines of code saying I want to take that type address that we showed. I want to add a parameter to it, or a field to it, an attribute called current conditions. And that's going to return the type current conditions, which is defined in my weather type. And it's going to use the query current conditions to retrieve that data. So if I come back over here and look at weather type, here's current conditions, there's the type. So that one line of code essentially says, whenever someone asks for current conditions under type address, run this query to get it. So if we go back into my requests down here, I can see that I can now also ask for current conditions. And if I send this request off, I can see that I'm getting, there's moderate rain and mist happening right now in Seattle, and it feels like about 45 degrees.
If we did not have to make a live call there, Carlos. We could have just put that.
We could have guessed. We could have probably known it was raining. It's that time of year, I suppose.
So just can you just step back and just say what are the 2 or 3 things that you did before we move on to the Apigee side?
Sure. So a couple of things that I did essentially. I built out this customer type live. This wasn't here before, and I defined this query right in front of your eyes. It took about 2 minutes. The trick there was essentially knowing what the response type was like. And I used a little utility that StepZen provides called JSON to SDL to automatically build these types. We're actually very close to having that right in our CLI. So you can simply provide the curl call in your CLI and we'll auto-generate all of this for you. But in this case, I had to do a little bit of work, little copy paste, and a little bit of typing to basically say, okay, I'm gonna allow someone to pass in an email, and here's where I put that into that REST API to make that call. Now, there are other attributes that we can supply to this parameter if you need security, different headers, different things that you need to do to change the HTTP request that's going out of StepZen, and then at the same time, there are different things you can do to modify the response that's coming back to make sure that it fits the correct type. And that's essentially it for creating a GraphQL API on top of a REST API in StepZen. It's 30 lines of code here. Again, this was a relatively simple API, but even complex ones, it's not that much more code to make that happen. Then we already had a pre-built one for weather. Again, this is, like I said, a little bit longer. They have more types available, so it's a little bit more work. So once we had these 2 different types and queries defined, we could basically combine them using something called a Materializer, which says I'm going to extend the type address from customer with current conditions from weather, and here's how I get it. And that's all it took. Deployed, and it was live and ready to call within minutes, essentially.
Awesome.
So now that we've got the API built, right, we've got our GraphQL API built, we could use it. But again, given everything that you've talked about previously, and we know that anyone who's serious about doing API work on the web or with partners, it needs API management. That's sort of a requirement from a security and analytics, et cetera, perspective. What do we do about that? Now, that's why this partnership is so great. I have an Apigee org here. We'll show you what this looks like. We worked with the engineers at Apigee to build an integration, and it's published right now. It's out on GitHub under the Apigee organization. It's called StepZen. And what this is, because both these platforms are API driven, it's actually very easy to start to build integrations between them. So in this case, even if you don't have a StepZen account, you can go out and clone this repo. And with your existing Apigee X or hybrid org, you can run this and do what I just did, essentially. build a GraphQL API and publish
Carlos, I
it
think
through Apigee.
and Carlos, this is a very important takeaway for the developers and listeners on a call, right? This is existing, it's right there. They can go to the repository, grab this. If they are existing Apigee customers, they can start using StepZen along with it. Alternatively, if they are trying to try a few things out with Apigee and StepZen, it's right there. It's something which we announced on the day of the partnership.
Exactly.
So,
We're just super proud of that.
Yep. And we will be improving it, because there are obviously, once you get kind of that first connection done, the ideas start flowing about what more could be done to make things better for users, and we've got a few of those in the works already. So what I want to do is here's my organization with no proxy deployed. I'm going to zip up. I've cloned this repo down. And I have it down here. There's a command in this repo called Apigee setup, and what that does essentially is it says what's your organization in Apigee, what environment do you want to deploy it to, what do you want the base path to be, etc., etc. Where's your StepZen schema? And if you look at the README for that repo, it walks you through doing all of this. But I just want to show you how quick this is. Again, because we're API driven. It should be even quicker than that. I'm a little bit worried my network is doing something funny.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It was my end. Usually when I run this, it's about 10 seconds tops. So that was it. And essentially what it does is it does a bunch of different things for you. It creates an API product. It creates a developer. It creates an app on the Apigee side. So you end up with an API key right here that you can use to call that API. And if we take a look over at, I have one request. Let me hop over to the other side quickly, and let's go in and reload this screen. It should be there. There we go.
And Carlos, I think just everything that you're showing is live, so it's
it's
showing a more delay than when you test it. It's the beauty of showing things live.
Yeah, everything is
absolutely. And for whatever reason, right around this time of day, my internet kind of slows down. I don't know if kids are getting home from school and hopping on things. Who knows what it is? But let's just turn on.
The joke, we shouldn't say, but the joke that we have, because between Carlos and me, is that when we're working with Apigee and StepZen, our biggest worry is not whether the Apigee service is up or available or StepZen is, but it's whether the cable provider that we're using, right?
Yeah, that's usually the problem.
Yeah.
So here is a very similar type of a call. I'm calling a different endpoint now. I'm calling that endpoint that I deployed to here, and this time I have to pass in an API key. So if I screw this up, let's kill the H from the end of it, and I send this, I should get back a response that says invalid API key, right, like that. So now I'm protecting my API with Apigee. Piece of cake. Obviously we knew that. But there's a few other things I can do. So if I send this, we should see, there we go, same results. And I could change this name. We could get a different request just to show that it's really live. Did I click send? There we go. Oh, there we go. And then one of the cool things I wanted to just show you about Apigee's GraphQL policy is it'll actually validate when I send this request. There we go. That's my client's a little bit slow, and I can see that, that's a schema validation field there. Obviously, in Apigee we could tighten that up so it's fancier, but this was just a quick demo. So in this case, the way that integration works, because GraphQL is strongly typed, we can introspect the schema of the endpoint. We can upload that schema to Apigee. So now Apigee knows what's acceptable and what's not for a query, and then it can protect that API based on that. So it can do things like making sure you're not traversing too deep in the graph, or in this case, it was just a simple, is that field even something you can ask for? So you can really control and lock down your API quite a bit. Obviously, with Apigee, super important as you start to do things like put these on the web or share them with, so many times a company needs to have have data accessible to customers, but also, customer service representatives that are going to need to see more data. Apigee is a great spot to do that sort of a thing, where you can kind of control based on who's calling it, whether or not something is allowed or not. So here we see a case of the API key policy following off. All of this was built automatically in this proxy for me. That's what that integration does, is it essentially just creates that proxy based on the information that it knows about the StepZen API and your Apigee org. So obviously you get all this great trace capability, and then of course you can start to get into looking at the analytics is going to automatically get captured just like any other API in Apigee. And you'll be able to dive in. This is newer for me. I don't quite know how the API monitoring stuff works. It's been a while, but it looks really impressive. The analytics capabilities in Apigee continue to evolve and improve.
Awesome, fantastic. Go ahead, because you were saying something, and then Helen would.
I was just about to say that this, if you're already using Apigee. You just saw an example of the use of the Apigee GraphQL policies and the runtime support. And thank you, Carlos, for actually summarizing it so well, where it actually shows executed policy and implications of it, as well as the analytics. So the power of the lifecycle management capabilities available in Apigee now for GraphQL.
That's exactly right. And then what we've done, a few other things, is that we have, Helen, if you can switch, can we switch to my view? Awesome. So Carlos pointed out a lot of things, how it's easy to build stuff with StepZen, and we are just kind of super proud of the fact that GraphQL doesn't have to be hard. It can be really, really easy. Point us to your REST APIs, and out pops the GraphQL that you can connect the dots and everything else. But at the same time, the work that we're doing with you all, right, because with you and your team, not only allows for all of the proxies and everything else, but some awesome work that we're doing with respect to analytics. The thing about GraphQL is that GraphQL is not a black box. It can be a black box, but in reality, the GraphQL is also walking a tree. And can we surface all of that stuff? This took this much time, this took that much time, all the way back, etc., etc. So we are doing some really great things together. But
it's really cool work that we're doing together. I'm really excited about the work. I'm actually very excited about how you're also building out the platform, right? I mean, the things that StepZen is doing to do, federation or optimizations in the platform as you simplify creating a graph on top of an existing query.
Exactly right.
Or existing API. I think it's great to see how we are bringing the best of our capabilities together to our customers.
And it's available now, right? So we want to end on this. Hopefully you all saw what we are doing together and what the promise of it and what the reality of it is right now. So it's simple enough. Go and read on stepzen.com, Apigee-StepZen, and that will be kind of your root page into everything else. There's a blog that is linked out there, but you can go to that blog on Bitly also. And fundamentally, you can actually sign up to StepZen through Apigee, okay? So that you don't have to we have just made sure that our management and account creation APIs are seamlessly integrated into Apigee. So it really is an awesome, seamless experience for you. And hopefully you'll give it a spin. Any last thoughts, Vikas?
From my perspective, I think two things. If there are, takeaways for our audience from this session, GraphQL is here, it's pervasive, but it needs to be managed. It needs to be secured. And that's all about the life cycle. So I think Apigee plus StepZen is right here, right now, helping developers with that. As a developer, if you have any doubts about embracing GraphQL, I'm hoping that we have clarified that for you, and you're going to pick up GraphQL next and start using it. More importantly, we recognize REST APIs and GraphQL and other non-RESTful interfaces are going to be working hand in hand, and they'll be pervasive. And that's something which we will continue to offer from our perspective in our platform.
Awesome. And there's nothing else to add out there. It's just we are proud of what we're doing in StepZen, but equally proud of the work that we're doing together to bring the best of.
Fist bump.
But okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Carlos, and
Of course.
everyone.
Carlos, a virtual fist bump to you.
There we go.
Do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah.
So we can take them.
Okay. So, any questions or comments?
I think we did a really good job in clarifying the concepts.
No, awesome. Exactly. It's always I never raised hands in the class. So shyness is definitely part of the technical skill set. Okay.
So I've got a comment for you guys. Just because we didn't do it during the demo, but one thing that I think is actually pretty cool is how easy it is to do the same thing with the database if you don't have a REST API. And one of the samples that the Apigee folks put into that GitHub integration is pulling data from a Cloud SQL database through StepZen to create a GraphQL API on top of that. So if there's anyone out there who thinks, oh, I've got a database, what can I do? Check out that repo. Look at the sample that includes a build script to get everything spun up on GCP, so it's easy to try it out for free and tear it down when you're done. And you will see just how easy it is to do the same thing I did with REST with a Cloud SQL database.
Awesome. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to now go to Micro Kitchen and get some good food out of Google. But have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all for listening in. All right.
Bye-bye.